So hey guys, it's John Sherwood here from johnsherwood.com. We've got Greg Dillon on the line tonight for our interview, and it's really exciting. We're going to be talking about Christians in the workplace and how our faith intersects with our work life. You know, Greg is a senior manager in learning and development over at Randstad USA, and he provides leadership coaching and training for the internal staff there. And Greg has appeared on the cover of Fortune magazine. He's been in CNBC's On the Money. He's got a coaching and training company that he leads, Dillon Coaching and Training. You can check that out at seeingpeoplework.com. Greg works with clients to be more effective in their careers, to navigate through the difficult waters of career transitions and career changes. You know, he's got a master's degree in training and development from Lesley University up there in Massachusetts. And he's been married to the love of his life for going on 30 years now with 3 adult children. So, Greg, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Really grateful to have you.
Absolutely. It's great to be with you, John, and thank you for the invitation to join you tonight.
Of course, of course. So just to kind of kick things off, so tell me a little bit about kind of your origin story. How did you get involved in career coaching and training, and what's sort of your own career path been, and how did you get involved in all that?
Good question. Well, I kind of fell into it because we had worked for, I had worked for a church in Fort Collins, Colorado, where Catherine, my wife, and I were both converted for a year and a half. And then we moved to Boston, as did many people in the 80s. And we worked in the ministry for 6.5 more years there. And we got out of the ministry in 1994. And of course, like a lot of people, I had to kind of figure out, who am I? What do I want to do? What am I good at? And how do I begin sorting all that out and then figuring out how to market myself into a position? So it was through my own transition that I had to really kind of figure a lot of this stuff out. And through all that, then I kind of quickly transitioned over in the Boston church, at least. I was working with the elders to help a lot of the people within the Boston church do the same thing. And I've continued to do that since then, really for the last 20 years. So. Got
you. Yeah, well, you know, I know that I personally have really benefited from a lot of your training and coaching and a lot of the experience that you've had. And you've helped me go through some career transitions in my own life and in my family's life. And I know that I'm a big believer in a lot of things that you taught me. And you know, these interviews that I do with people are people that I'm usually really well connected with and believe in. And you know, and I even go on and I've shared some of those principles that you taught me with many other people. And I am really tempted to take credit for all of that, you know, but I get myself and I say, no, actually I learned this from another guy. And so, you know I like to sound brilliant, but it really wasn't from me. So what are some of the typical issues that you kind of see people facing when they're trying to determine their career for themselves, or they're finding themselves in a career transition? Like, what are some of the typical issues that you see rise to the surface across the board?
I think one of the things I see happen the most, John, is that people don't do enough. Often they don't do enough self-reflection, and they really don't know, because of that, they don't know what they really want. They don't really know what they're good at. And they will often, based on inadequate information, they'll launch out to try to get a job in a certain job title. And they really often don't know what the day in, day out the tasks are that are involved in the job they think they want. And so maybe they go on to land a job in that, and then pretty quickly realize, whoa, this is not quite what I thought it was going to be.
Right.
And I'm now realizing I don't like a lot of what I'm having to do.
Right.
And that's a bad time to learn that after you're in that position.
You know, and it's interesting because you bring that up, and it's like, you know, the statistics say that the mass majority of people are very dissatisfied in their work. Even Christians, right? Even people in the community of faith find themselves day in and day out really dissatisfied, not drawing much meaning or satisfaction from their work. And like you said, some of that can really be due to kind of getting in sort of ahead of themselves and not really understanding what they're getting into. But what other type of advice or wisdom would you give to people who find themselves in a place where they're really dissatisfied or they have very little satisfaction in their work, how does that intersect with the Christian? How does that intersect with the community of faith? How can they, as a person of faith, really navigate through those waters and still be, maybe even in a job or a career that they don't like much?
Well, I think I'm a big believer in the fact that God really does want us to work in jobs that we're good at and that we enjoy. And one of the things I often go back to, John, I know you know this, is in Genesis 3.
Right.
All the stuff that went on in the Garden of Eden before the fall of man was in paradise, right? It was, I think we can kind of anticipate heaven will be similar. And one of the things that's in there is God giving Adam the job of working the garden,
right,
which means there's work in paradise.
Right.
And I wouldn't be surprised if when we get to heaven, maybe there's going to be jobs in heaven.
Right.
I think most people, me included, we tend to think, oh yeah, heaven's going to be like me sitting on a beach just sipping cocktails and relaxing.
Right.
But God knows better than that. And
right.
Even back in the Garden of Eden, there was something good
right.
about us working. Now, of course, after the fall, sin came into the picture and God cursed the ground and it became a lot more difficult.
Right.
But I think we have to be careful that we don't think that work in and of itself is sinful or bad.
Right. And it's interesting because I think especially as Christians from a Christian worldview, we get to see glimpses, I think, of that goodness of work, whether it's maybe working outside. I just recently became a homeowner and I'm out there tinkering with the lawn and I'm trying to get some flowers to grow and I'm able to create something and I draw some satisfaction from that. Or maybe it's a young mom who draws satisfaction in being able to nurture and love and train a child, or it's somebody being able to create something at work that didn't exist before that really adds benefit. I mean, I think even in small ways we do start to sense this satisfaction in work. But like you said, in the fall, that's not necessarily a majority of the time. There is a lot of our work that is a struggle, that it doesn't produce a lot of great things or the things that we want. But I agree. I think even in experience, we can see some glimpses to that sort of work in paradise, if you will. And I think for me, it gives me hope that that those glimpses are going to be the all-encompassing reality that we find there in heaven. So what is one or two things that you would advise someone who maybe finds himself unemployed or underemployed or maybe just misemployed? How do you advise people who find themselves wanting to kind of make a transition and get into something a little different or better for themselves?
Well, there's a lot to all that, of course, and those three different conditions, being unemployed versus being misemployed or underemployed, are very different.
Right.
But there are some overarching things, and one of the main things I often tell people is work your relationships, not your resume. And as an example, there was a brother here in Atlanta that just last week I was speaking with, that called me up. He said, hey, I kind of heard you're the career guy that I should talk with. And, I'm looking to get some advice. I've been trying for a year to really get a better job and I haven't been able to do it. And I said, so tell me what you've been doing to try to get a better job. And of course, like most people, everything he told me was about sending his resume out and perfecting his resume and applying online and on and on. And I said, okay, that's fine. Now tell me, how did you get your last job?
Right.
And so he was like, well, my mom knew someone, who hooked me up and and that's how that came about. And I said, okay, well, how about the job before that?
Right.
Well, I knew someone from previous job and they kind of hooked me up and Okay, how about the job before that? Same thing.
Right.
And I said, do you see a pattern?
Right.
And my point was, most people end up getting jobs through relationships, through their network. And yet, when most people go about searching for a job, they don't purposely seek out to work their network.
Right.
They work through their resume. And I think that's a major mistake that really can slow people's job search down and discourage them because when you work your resume, it's very heavily leaning on your credentials.
Right.
And for a lot of people, their credentials don't look great, even though they're a great worker.
Right.
But the relationships and the trust there is a whole different dynamic that works much more powerfully for people.
Yeah, no, that's great. I know I found myself in the position of, hey, I'm sending out a dozen resumes a day, just to come up empty-handed with lint in my pockets. And wow, it doesn't get much more discouraging than that, because you feel like you're just spinning your wheels. And I know a lot of people out there feel that. So what about for like maybe the recent college grad or the really young professional who maybe doesn't really have much of an existing network, or they don't really have very many relationships to kind of lean on? How do you sort of advise that person get started?
Well, that's a great question. And I still believe most people do have some kind of a network, whether it's professors in college, coaches you had in doing sports, friends of your parents, something, right? For most people, there's still some amount of network.
Right.
So it's still about, and maybe you go to a church or a synagogue or something, you
Right.
still know people somewhere that are working professionally. And the key ingredient here is that they trust you.
Right.
And
Right.
that's what you're looking for, is to get someone who trusts you to recommend you to someone.
It's interesting because I have found sometimes in myself and in other people, I've seen this too, that there's almost like a reluctance to like want to use people, maybe an old professor or a coach or a friend. It's kind of like, oh man, I don't want them to feel like I'm just using them for this recommendation, or I'm just kind of like using them for what they can do for me. How do you usually deal with that attitude? How do you kind of like talk through that? Because there's obviously some real feelings there that are probably genuine and valid, but also they can be taken too far to where you miss out maybe on some opportunities and people who really would love to help if they had the opportunity.
Absolutely. That's an excellent point, John. I do think when you're working your network, you can still not be selfishly focused.
Right.
I think you can, when you do meet with someone to do an informational interview, for example, what I always did was I would start off with, well, tell me a little bit about you. How did you get into your career? And I want to hear their story. Most human beings love to tell their own story.
Right.
And they feel given to when you're interested genuinely in them.
Right.
It's not just all about how can you help me out.
Right.
Now, the flip side of that, and I like the way you worded it, you can take it too far. I do think my own experience has been hands down, most people want to help. If they trust you and they know you in some context and they trust you, because people have helped them.
Right.
And they want to pass it, they want to pay it forward.
Right.
And they're more than willing to help out.
Right. That's great. So, as we're kind of wrapping up here, what are some resources and what direction would you point people to kind of further explore or maybe be able to get some knowledge or get connected with some things that can help them in their career or career transitions? Where would you point them?
Well, of course, there are some books that are just sort of standard go-to books. One of them I always recommend, and I think I did to you once upon a time, was What Color Is Your Parachute?
Yep.
It was written originally in the late 1960s by Richard Nelson Bolles. He has continued to write a new version of that book every single year.
Wow.
And so it's been going on for 40-something, almost 50 years probably. And it's a great resource book that you don't have to read cover to cover. If you're someone just getting out of college, just read those chapters. If you're someone who's in their 40s or 50s or older and you're making a career transition, just read those chapters.
Right.
The thing I always tell people about that book is it's filled with exercises. And the benefit of that book is you got to do the exercises.
Right.
Don't just conceptualize them and move on.
Right.
Put yourself through the exercises. Another a great resource I recommend also is if you have a chance, take the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator.
Okay.
MBTI. And if you're just out of college, the college you went to probably administers that to students and former students for free.
Yeah.
If not, go to a local university and go to their career, function that helps graduating, graduates and alumni with their careers and take it. It's cheap. I don't even know what it is. It's probably $20 or less to take it.
Yeah.
Learn what your core code type is. And then also a book I often recommend is called Do What You Are. And it's a book that's all about job careers and job titles that fit people of specific MBTI codes.
Gotcha. Nice.
And it's very, very helpful.
Very good. Very good. And so if anybody had any questions or wanted to, maybe get in contact with you, they could do that at your site, seeingpeoplework.com. Is that correct?
Yeah, or even quicker, they can just email me at Greg S, as in Scott, Dillon, so GregsDillon at bellsouth.net.
Fantastic. Well, Greg, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time tonight. I know it's going to be a great benefit to all my viewers and listeners. And just thank you so much for being willing to share what you have.
Absolutely. Glad to do it, John. Again, thank you for the invitation to join you.
No problem. Have a great night.
You too.